In August 2023, Huawei did something that shocked the entire tech world. They released the Mate 60 Pro, a smartphone with a cutting-edge 7nm chip inside.
Huawei. To be sleek, it's fast, it's being powered by a made-in-China chip.
This was the exact technology the US had spent years trying to keep out of Chinese hands. And because of that,
the US has launched its own investigation into the Chinese chip.
What they found was a network of obscure Chinese companies, secretly funneling restricted semiconductor equipment to Huawei through a web of shell companies and intermediaries. Investigators called it a shadow supply chain network, but Huawei's workaround was just one thread in a much larger web. One that's moving hundreds of billions of dollars in goods, technology, and resources around the world while staying almost completely invisible. Welcome to China's Shadow Silk Road. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. For centuries, the Silk Road connected China to the West through a web of intermediaries and waypoints. Today, history is repeating itself, but instead of caravans crossing deserts, we have container ships and air freights crossing oceans. For 3 decades, the world plugged itself into China, and by 2010, China had transformed into the world's factory. But by the late 2010s, relations between Washington and Beijing had soured. Accusations of intellectual property theft, trade deficits, and national security fears turned cooperation into confrontation. What followed was a multi-year escalation. Tariffs in 2018, major Chinese tech companies blacklisted in 2019, and growing pressure on China's energy ties to Iran and Russia.
Stressing that punishment is inevitable if they ignore their warnings.
The world's most efficient supply chain began to look fragile. Then came the pandemic. When COVID-19 froze Chinese ports and factories, that fragility turned into full-blown panic. Almost overnight, companies across the globe began saying the same thing: China plus one. Keep China, but add another country for safety and diversification. Factories popped up in Vietnam, Thailand, India, and Mexico. By 2023, Mexico had even overtaken China as America's largest trading partner. But China wasn't going to sit idle. As Western firms moved out, Chinese firms moved with them, pouring investment into those very same China plus one countries, building factories, supplying machinery, and wiring up the logistics. Let's take Mexico as an example. Its tech exports to the US jumped from 60 billion to 102 billion since 2018. Yet, much of the value still comes from imported parts, many sourced from Asia and often China itself. China quietly rewired the map, embedding itself deeper than ever, sometimes just one border away. But rewiring the map was just the surface of the Shadow Silk Road. Underneath, China had developed an entire toolkit for staying invisible. Different tactics for different industries, each designed to slip past oversight. Let's break down a few documented cases. Method 1. The Proxy Network. Let's revisit our example from the start of the video. In 2019, Washington blacklisted Huawei, accusing it of violating US sanctions by selling American technology to Iran.
But that's not all. Huawei is also seen as a cybersecurity threat to the US.
The move barred American firms and even foreign companies using US technology from supplying Huawei with high-end chips it needed for its 5G infrastructure. Almost overnight, China's most powerful tech company found itself starting to get cut off from key suppliers. Instead of do nothing, a Shenzhen government fund backed a web of new chipmakers, set up to fill the gaps left by US export bans, keep companies like Huawei running, and aid in building out China's chip-making capabilities. This proxy network exploited loopholes across 3 dimensions as the US continued to impose stricter restrictions on the Chinese tech sector. First, the timing gap. When Washington expanded export restrictions on advanced chip-making tools in 2022, it took Japan and the Netherlands, home to companies like Tokyo Electron and ASML, nearly 2 years to match those rules. That delay let the proxy network continue to legally purchase key parts of the chip-making ecosystem until this regulatory gap closed. Second, the geography gap. The Proxy network worked through brokers in Singapore and Malaysia, where shipments of semiconductor tools spiked after broadening export controls in 2022. Analysts say middlemen helped move restricted gear into China under generic trade codes, effectively hiding sensitive exports in plain sight. Third, the definition gap. While export controls focused on hardware, the Proxy network discovered they could still acquire services, technical know-how, and components from specialized firms abroad, particularly in Taiwan and South Korea, transferring not just the equipment but the expertise to operate it. To showcase the magnitude of the Proxy network's persistence, in 2023 China had reportedly imported nearly $40 billion worth of chip-making fabrication equipment despite export controls. Method 2. The Gray Fleet. China needs oil, a lot of it. In fact, China imports more than 70% of its oil, one of the world's highest dependency ratios. That dependency is risky. Global oil still runs on Western finance and maritime systems often tied to the US dollar. So China faces a bitter choice: rely on the same system that can be used to pressure it, or find alternative suppliers outside that system. Enter sanctioned sellers: Iran, Venezuela, and Russia. Their crude trades at steep discounts because few buyers will touch it. For China, that means cheaper oil, friendlier partners, and deals that can be struck outside the US dollar system. So how do you move millions of barrels without leaving a paper trail? Enter the Gray Fleet, a sprawling network of aging tankers that operate in the gray zones of international shipping. These are ships that have legally stepped outside the regulated system. Here's how it works: reflag or use flags of convenience, a legal paperwork maneuver that lets owners register ships in countries with looser rules or less transparent ownership, spoofing or disabling AIS transponders, the automatic identification system ships use to broadcast position and identity, making the vessels disappear from public trackers or appear in different locations, perform ship-to-ship transfers in international waters, moving oil between tankers at sea to mix or rebrand cargo and obscure its origin. Let's look at a few examples. First, a Reuters investigation working with Roque Marine Global found that in August 2022, the Wen Yao was broadcasting its ASI signal off the coast of Brazil. But satellite data showed the ship was actually thousands of miles away at Venezuela's Jose terminal, quietly loading crude oil. Once the oil was secured, the tanker spoofed its signal again to appear back near Brazil, before finally transmitting its real position and eventually delivering the Venezuelan oil back to China. Second, in the same Reuters investigation, leaked emails showed the Remy was described as living a double life. It had loaded Iranian crude under false context, then sailed towards the Strait of Malacca, where it met the Shania Queen, which was also spoofing its ASI location. The two ships performed a ship-to-ship transfer under the cover of false coordinates, after which the Shania Queen completed the voyage back to China. Together, these cases reveal how sophisticated the Gray Fleet has become. To showcase the magnitude of the Gray Fleet, a Kepler report showed the number of shadow vessels increased from 97 to over 3,000 between 2022 to 2024. And in 2023, Iran moved an estimated $50 billion worth of crude this way, with almost 90% of it bound for China. It's a reminder that in global trade, when you close the front door, someone always finds a way through the back. Method 3. Origin laundering. Since 2012, the United States imposed tariffs on Chinese-made solar panels to protect its own manufacturers from heavily subsidized competition. But as direct imports from China declined over the following years, shipments of cheap solar panels still flooded the US market. In early 2022, a Californian firm called Axon Solar filed a petition claiming that many of those made in Vietnam solar panels were actually Chinese, simply reassembled abroad to dodge US tariffs. US regulators investigated solar panel imports and found something shocking. 4 Southeast Asian countries supplied 80% of American solar panels. But Commerce Department investigators discovered these panels were actually Chinese, just assembled in Malaysia or Vietnam to dodge tariffs. The US extended tariffs to cover them, but by then, the damage was done. The industry had restructured around the loophole. This shadow network doesn't just dodge tariffs, it erodes the entire sanctioned system meant to keep advanced tech and energy out of the West's adversaries' hands. But the West isn't just standing still. A new toolkit is taking shape. Number 1. Sealing the leaks. To counter proxy networks, the US, Japan, and the Netherlands have finally aligned on export control lists for chip-making tools. Licenses now also follow the equipment, so if a machine is resold to a shell company, both the seller and the end user face penalties. Number 2. Policing the seas. To rein in the gray fleet, government departments are blacklisting ships that spoof AIS or illegally trade oil mid-sea. Once flagged, insurance agencies must cancel coverage, leaving those tankers unable to dock or refuel. Satellite data firms such as Kepler and Lloyd's List now feed enforcement dashboards used by sanctioned investigators as well. And finally, tracking the supply chain. Custom agencies are using AI mapping tools like Altana to link shipping and supplier data, exposing hidden components inside made in Vietnam or made in Mexico exports. So here's where we are. The original Silk Road lasted 1400 years, not because it was direct, but because it was adaptable. When one route closed, merchants found another. When one kingdom fell, the caravan shifted. China's Shadow Silk Road operates on the same timeless principle. Every time the West tightens controls, China finds another route. Tariffs pushed factories to Vietnam, sanctions built proxy networks, energy bans gave rise to the ghost fleet. The harder you try to contain it, the more the system adapts. That's the real power of the Shadow Silk Road. If this story opened your eyes to how the Chinese shadow supply chain works, hit subscribe and join us on our journey as we decode the hidden systems that shape our world. Thanks for watching.